Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Baseball A Pure Perspective. I'm your host, Patrick Cardan, along here with my partner, Gerard LaBelle. And this edition is brought to you by eCredit Success, life-changing credit solutions for veterans and military personnel. VetsOn Media has partnered with ECS to offer a free credit consultation and discounts for all veterans and military personnel. VetsOn Media, just go to www.vetsonradio.com and click on the eCredit Success logo to get your free consultation today. How you doing, Gerard?
Hey, it is a fantastic day, except that it's too doggone hot here in the Valley of the Sun.
Yeah, it's supposed to hit 108 today, 109 tomorrow. Time to jump in the pool.
Mean weather. My 6-month bad mood has started.
But you know, there's no humidity here. How about that?
Well, there's no humidity in the oven that you roast your Thanksgiving turkey in either, and that doesn't make it any less hot.
That's true. You just don't drip.
That's right.
Unless it's the turkey dressing.
Well,
it's been quite a week in baseball. I have a personal favorite. I'm sure anybody that is anti-Yankee or anything else or probably had the same feeling, even though it was another New York team beating them every year now. So 17 years now they started the interleague play in 1997. The New York Mets and New York Yankees play a season series, and it's only one place here, one place there. What's different this year, they would have every other weekend. They would play 3 at the Mets Park, which used to be Shea Stadium, now Citi Field, and then 3 at Yankee Stadium in the other 2 weeks. They were always on the weekend, always on national TV. But what they did with the format for the entire baseball season, the city rivalries played 4 games, Monday through Thursday, no weekend games. And it was 2 in one ballpark, and then the next 2 in the other ballpark. This week in New York, it was 2 at Citi Field, and the next 2 days at Yankee Stadium. And for the first time in history, the Mets took the season series, swept the season series. The Yankees had did it once before, but this was the first time for the Mets.
And you gotta love it, even if you're not a Mets fan. Like honestly, I'm not a Mets fan. I know that you are, but what I am is a fan of whoever beats the Yankees. So I have got to be a Mets fan this week. I label myself as a Yankee hater, and it's just because. And you know, the Yankee people will always say, well, it's jealousy. And I can't necessarily agree with that. Certainly, I would love to see my Tigers have won 27 pennants in the American League. But, you know, when I think about that...
Actually, it was 40 pennants and 27 World Series.
27 World Series. Okay, you got to see. And I don't even like to be pure in my thinking about the Yankees. That's, but, yeah, I'd love to see the Tigers to have done that. But on the other hand, the way I feel about the American League now is that if my Tigers can't be in, I would like to see somebody like Cleveland or Seattle or somebody that's not been to the World Series in a long time.
And Seattle is the only team in the American League that has not ever been to the World Series.
No, and there you have it. And
the other team, of course, is the Nationals, or the Expos. They had never made it either.
Right. But I just want to see some fresh blood there. Some different. And, of course, you know, the old, back in the day, before free agency, it was always the idea that the Yankees purchased the pennant by going out and trading old has-been stars to the Kansas City Athletics to pick up young and upcoming stars. They'd burn those kids out, and then they'd trade them back to Kansas City.
And a lot of times, because these teams were financial trouble, and they would pay the teams to bail them out.
As long as the Yankees threw some money in, which they always had plenty of money in supply. The old Yankee Stadium held, 67,000 people. And the Yankees always put plenty of people in the park.
Let me ask you this. Let's say it's the last week of the season. Detroit's... and Yankees running neck and neck, or Detroit and, let's say, Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Well, now the Central Division obviously would be something like the Detroit and the White Sox. Yankees are out of it. But the only way on the final day of the season the Tigers are going to get in if the Yankees beat the White Sox 3 in a row. Who are you rooting for?
Wow, that hurts my feelings. I got to tell you, it would just be very difficult for me to root for the Yankees. But I mean, if that was the absolute and there were no other mathematical equations, then yeah, I'm afraid I'd have to root for the Yankees to beat the Sox. And you know, the thing of it is that if it came down to something like that, it's more than likely that the Yankees could not beat them 3 games in a row. So I mean, even if they were playing at Yankee Stadium, for instance. But yeah, in that kind of a case, in order for the Tigers to get in, I would have to root for the Yankees.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the Yankees, this is the final year of Mariano Rivera's career. He's had a storied career, over 500 saves. He was out last year for an injury. Didn't know if he was going to come back, but didn't want to go out that way. And something historic happened on the second game of this 4-game series. The Yankees and the Mets played each other. He came in a 1-0 game, threw 9 pitches, 3 batters, 3 hitters, blew the save, and the Mets won the game. What was unique about that, which is amazing to me, it's the first time in his 18-year career, in 700-plus save opportunities, that he blew a save without recording 1 out.
He failed to get a single out in the inning and blew the save, and gave up the 3 hits. And of course, David Wright is a legitimate big league hitter. But gave up hits in situations where he's just not used to doing that. And I think the telling tale about that is that on the 1 hit he gives up, he fails to go and back up the catcher when there's a play at the plate. He's standing in the middle of the infield, and you can see the expression on his face, almost like, what's going on here? He's not supposed to hit me.
Yeah, he's thrown his glove over the rookie shortstop. He's only played 3 games up until that point.
Yeah.
He picked up from a Colorado reject.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brignac.
Right. And, here's the thing, too, is that it's nice to be able to see the Yankees as a real team, not just like, when I was a kid, growing up in Detroit, you always were like, well, what place will the Tigers come in behind the Yankees? Will they come in second or third or fifth or whatever? Because it was almost a given. The Yankees are going to win the American League, and of course that was well before division play was even thought of. It was a given. The Yankees were going to win the American League. And that is where the Yankee haters came from. They just got tired of seeing the Yankees win the American League every year. And, of course, that spawned the Broadway musical, Damn Yankees. About the Senators, the guy making the deal with the devil to help the Senators get into the World Series.
Yeah, of course, and we also know who made another deal with the Yankees, and that was the Red Sox owner, Frazee. He wanted to finance a play called No, No, No Net, so he sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees for cash in 1918, and then Red Sox didn't win again up until the next century.
The curse of the Bambino, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But when he sold the Babe to New York, he sold him as a pitcher.
And he still holds as a pitcher some of the World Series records.
And I just don't think that they had a clue that he was the kind of hitter that he turned out to be. Otherwise, I can't see them, making that deal no matter what play he was trying to put on Broadway. It just seems so odd, but I'm not sure that's why the Red Sox didn't make it to the World Series. Although
good folklore,
it's a nice, it's a nice folklore story, and of course, baseball is full of those kind of folklorish things.
Just like the Cubs with the curse of the Billy Goat.
Absolutely.
And that's another team, like you said. If my team doesn't get in, I want to see the Cubs win the World Series in my life.
Absolutely. I rooted for the Cubs.
Yeah, me too.
And just because I know, having been in Detroit and lived there in '68, I know what the Tigers winning that pennant and World Series did for my city. And I know that a place like Cleveland, a place like Seattle, a place that hasn't seen anything, to cheer about in a long time. They need something, and that's probably the biggest reason why I dislike the Yankees so much, because it was always where do you think Detroit's going to come in behind the Yankees, or where do you think the White Sox will come in behind the Yankees? A few years ago, when the White Sox won the pennant and the championship against
05, Houston.
Yeah, against
and that's
Houston.
the only time Houston was in the World Series.
I was torn, because I really would have liked to have seen Houston win too. But I also thought about the Sox. When's the last time the Sox were even in the World Series?
1919, the Black Sox scandal.
Yeah, so I want to see different blood in
last
there.
time
I
they
want to
won.
see it be competitive. Yeah, right.
They lost to the Dodgers in 59.
Right, the Dodgers in 59. And, of course, who are they facing then? Koufax and Newcomb and Drysdale. And,
Yeah.
who could blame anybody for losing to them,
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the Yankees got swept in 63 with Drysdale and Koufax.
Drysdale and
games, 4
Koufax.
straight.
Mm-hmm.
Their ERA was like 1
Yes.
in the entire World Series.
Amazing. And then Claude Osteen, I think, was one of the other pitchers that won one of the games.
Correct. Yeah.
So I like to see a new blood get in there, and very honestly, I'd probably like to see the Tigers go on a tear, win 6 or 8 pennants and 4 or 5 World Series in a row, but. That's so hard. If you look back and think about the Big Red Machine in the 70s in Cincinnati, they got beat by the Mets.
In 73.
Yeah.
That's 40 years ago. They're celebrating the 40th anniversary. That was the year Bud Harrelson and Pete Rose got into that altercation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a funny thing about that. They won back-to-back World Series in 75, 76.
Mm-hmm.
They lost to the Orioles in 70. They lost to the A's in 72. And then they came back and they lost to the Mets at the time when it was 3 out of 5 in the
3 out of
National
5 in the National
playoff.
League Championship Series,
Yeah.
right?
They were there in 73, and then they lost to the Dodgers out because they were in the West that year. But 75 they won, 76 they won, 76 they won 108 games, and then 77 that's when the free agency started coming in and the team was broken up.
That's right. And I see two sides of that, because. My thought on that is that if the owner of a team makes so much money that he can pay somebody $25 million a year for hitting the baseball, then more power to the hitter. Okay. The other side of that, though, is that I can't imagine for the life of me seeing Al Kaline, who was my childhood hero, wearing any uniform besides the Tigers. And I remember that. There were players on that team that won that 68 World Championship that ended up going elsewhere. Dick McAuliffe was the second baseman on that team, had been a Tiger for many, many years, and at the end, he ended up playing the last year of his career in Boston. And it was so odd to see him wearing a Red Sox uniform. Jim Northrup was the center fielder on that team. And played right field when Kaline was hurt for part of the season. He ended up in Baltimore for the last year of his career. Mickey Lolich, the hero of the World Series, ended up in a Mets uniform.
For Rusty Staub.
For Rusty Staub, yeah. So, I mean, just the idea of seeing somebody, it's hard to develop a loyalty to somebody when you know that they may only be a rental player. He may only be here for a year, because when he goes to free agency next year, we may not be able to afford him anymore.
And we've already seen these people with 10-year contracts get traded before and so they weren't staying with that team that long anyway.
Right.
I think Tony Gwynn was one of the last ones to finish his career. The more recent one, I think, was we know Barry Larkin did it with the Reds.
Right.
And it looks like David Wright, now that he signed that contract, will probably be a lifetime.
He'll probably be a lifetime Met.
The Mets never had one like that. Lou Gehrig was one. Even Babe Ruth, he didn't know when to quit.
Right.
He went over to the Boston Braves.
Yeah. And that raises a question too. You know, when does a ball player know that it's time to hang it up? You know, and I can see if a guy decides that he wants to hang on, and the last 3 years he's only hit 213, and he used to be 25 to 35 home runs a year, and in the last 3 years he's only hit 7 home runs in all 3 years. So, then I understand that if the club can get some value for him, then yeah, okay. But at some point, I think there's an obligation. And again, it's one of the things that I thought was where the Yankees were kind of crooks. They would take a guy, they would use him up, and then when he still had a little bit of value, they'd trade him and get with some cash to Kansas City to get some young phenom. And of course, I'm picking on Kansas City because they seem to have done it the most. But a lot of the clubs, I remember the year that Camilo Pascual was the only thing the Washington Senators had, and the Yankees picked him up at the trade deadline, and he saved probably a dozen games going down the stretch. And could Washington use what they sent over there? Probably, but again, it just is a question of, how can you be loyal to a particular person if this year they're playing for St. Louis, next year they're playing for Washington, the following year they're playing for Tampa Bay? It's pretty difficult, It makes it kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean, look at Albert Pujols now that he's got his $250 million. He just seems to be a mediocre player now.
Yes,
the last couple of years.
Yes, and you wonder. I mean,
still good numbers, but nothing like
Albert Pujols numbers.
Right.
That's right. And you can't say that he isn't protected in that lineup that Los Angeles has put together. The Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Mm-hmm. He's. I think he's got some pretty nice sticks around him to protect him a little bit, but he's not. Let's face it, he's getting old by baseball standards. Mm-hmm. And you can look at people like, one of my favorites, old lefty Warren Spahn. He hung around for a long time. Stan Musial hung around for a long time. But that's more the. That's not the norm. Mm-hmm. That's the aberration. Those guys that can play into their 40s and still be effective. That's
the average player plays less than 5 years. Yeah, you average it out.
That's right.
And speaking of longevity and the pitching, you mentioned we talked earlier about Warren Spahn, that 16-inning game that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 240 pitches. They would do pitching against the Giants.
Yes,
and
Juan Marichal had the other side, and he threw 212 in 16 innings.
And Willie Mays won it with a home run.
Home run. That's right.
But again, 240 pitches, 16 innings, complete game. It's just that's why I'll go back to that Met Yankee series this weekend, which is amazing. They had John Neese walked one batter in the first of that 4-game series. They didn't walk a batter the rest of that series, that pitching staff. The last 3 games, 0 walks, which is amazing.
That is. And in this day and age, that is really amazing.
Yeah. And what I don't understand, and which drives me nuts about this pitch count, okay, he's approaching 100 pitches. Here is Dylan G, who's had a rough outing. Mm-hmm. He had an aneurysm at the end of last year. He had some little complications. He got cleaned out. They said he wasn't the same pitcher. He's been struggling this year. He comes into this game after 1 out. In the 3rd inning, the Yankees didn't get a base runner the rest of the game. They run a couple of relievers. So he's 1 out in the 8th inning. He's retired his last 15 batters. His last 5 batters were struck out. He's only had 88 pitches, and he was pulled. 88 pitches.
Incredible. And when you think about Warren Spahn with that 16-inning ball game, it's actually like he pitched both ends of a doubleheader. And
they're winning 3-1 too.
When you pull the Mets pitcher with 88 pitches, that's Spahn threw 3 times as many pitches in one game.
I just don't get that philosophy. I mean, that's why there are all the injuries, and all these guys didn't have injuries like that as often. I mean, everyone on almost every team right now has Tommy John surgery.
Right, and you know the other thing about Lefty there was that after he threw that 240 some pitches, I think it was 242, he made his next start. Not like he had to take an extra day or two off. He made his next start, and I guess you know you look at it from the ball club's point of view. That, hey, we've invested a lot of money in this guy and we don't want him burning out his arm. And that, you know, talking about that controversy last year with Strasburg at Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Might they have been in the World Series had they let him continue to pitch?
That's a good question. We'll never know.
We'll never know the answer.
They really choked within that last inning against the Cardinals.
Wow. Yes. And so, you know, I understand if they're going to invest that kind of money, they want to protect their investment. On the other side of that, let's talk again about Cleveland. Cleveland hasn't won a World Series since I can't remember
1948.
when. 48. Okay.
They had a good team. Bob Feller.
Would the fans of Cleveland like to see their pitchers stay out there on the mound and get the opportunity for a win? Or do they want to think in terms of, oh, let's protect him so that he can pitch for us next year? I don't think so.
No way.
They want that World Series win, and that's where some of these owners are not thinking like a baseball fan. They're thinking like a baseball owner. And it's strange. It's a strange thing because, like you said, this pitch count thing is just, it drives you wild if you are a baseball purist.
Yeah, and the game is completely different now, not only with the money, but again, they're trying to protect, and money is the reason behind the pitch count because they're trying to protect them and baby them for every. If you notice, and I liked it with the second game when Matt Harvey was pitching the other night, he turns around, protects his arm, he got hit in the back on a line drive, picked the ball up, and threw the guy out. The trainer runs out. Every little scratch, the trainer runs. He was thrown right. He said, "Go back in the dugout. Go back in the dugout. I don't want you here. I'm fine." But it's ridiculous, and that's part of the problem. And instead of strengthening their arms, pitching more, you know, Tom Seaver said, "Yeah, I had a pitch count. It was about 150, 160." Yeah. In the fourth game of the '69 World Series, he was still in the 10th inning.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Well, and you know, you talk about babying. I recall, and I begrudgingly admire Bob Gibson. Played for the Cardinals, who are the Yankees of the National League, if you ask me. But I recall that he got struck on the femur with a line drive that broke his leg. And he threw 3 more pitches before he collapsed on the mound. And, you know, nobody babied him. Nobody came out to see.
He told Tim McCarver to get lost in the picture and come out to him. So what are you doing out here? I know what I'm doing.
Get out of here. Yeah, that's right. You know, so, and you got to, you know, again, as a purist, you got to admire that kind of a guy. You got to admire a Koufax, a Drysdale, you know, those kind of people, whether they're on your team or against your team, you got to admire them because they were guts and, you know, the big chaw of tobacco in their cheek and go out there and get, you know, rub a little dirt on it and play ball.
And we found out that tobacco isn't actually the healthiest thing to do. You know, Joe Garagiola had a cause going for a few years to stop that because of his old buddies dying of cancer from just having it in their lips and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he's done with that recently, but that was a big thing to him. One other thing I want to mention about this weekend today actually is June 1st, the first anniversary of the Mets' first no-hitter. And Johan Santana, who's now disabled, who knows if he'll ever pitch again. I can tell you one thing, it won't happen again today because they got spot starter Colin McHugh, who's shooting his mouth off this week. He's not going to go anywhere. But we'll get more into that after our first break here. We'll be back in a few minutes on Baseball, A Pure Perspective.
Hey everybody, it's Adam from Vets On with Adam and James. Are you looking to improve your credit score? Do you need goal-oriented professional strategy to improve your credit that fits your busy lifestyle? Then eCreditSuccess.com is your site. They teach you the skills to help improve your credit while offering trade line acquisitions, error correction, 24/7 online tracking, discounts for military, and free consultation for being a listener of VetsOnMedia.com. Signing up is easy, and they offer a no-risk refund policy in most programs based on a specific score increase determined prior to your enrollment. So call now and get started at 855-234-7334 or visit us online at VetsOnMedia.com and click on the eCredit Success logo on our homepage.
Hey everybody, this is James from Vets On. Special Operations Wounded Warriors, or SOW, is a nonprofit organization that was formed in 2012. Their purpose is to provide outdoor experiences to a select group of active duty and veterans from the special operations community that have been injured or wounded while protecting our nation. SOW's mission is to provide outdoor activities and specialized hunts to deserving men and women of the special operations community. How can you help? SOW is in need of both sponsorship and donations to help fund their mission. Your support will directly help provide outdoor activities for deserving special operations wounded warriors. You can donate today by going to www.sowhunts.org. Again, that's www.sowwhunts.org. And check them out at Facebook at Special Operations Wounded Warrior.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
What the hell? Vets on Radio, the mecca of veteran entertainment.
Give this little cookie an hour before we're doing the no pants dance. Time to musk up.
Wow. Never ceases to amaze me. What cologne you gonna go with? London Gentleman or... Wait. No. Hold on. Blackbeard's Delight.
No. She gets a special cologne. It's called...
Vets on Radio.
They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time.
Hey everyone, this is James from Vets On. I'd like to talk with you briefly about a serious issue that needs your attention. Blue Falcon Syndrome. Blue Falcon Syndrome is at an all-time high. Most buddies don't even know they've contracted Blue Falcon Syndrome until it's too late. Blue Falcon Syndrome is often misdiagnosed as asshole-itis. If left untreated, it can often develop into other severe disabilities such as loss of friends, blanket parties, sniper checks, and the most severe, death. So go to www.vetsonradio.com to help support the fight for the cure.
Welcome back to Baseball: A Pure Perspective on this first day of June, night 2013. I'm here with my partner Gerard LaBelle, and we were talking about as we left, the first no-hitter was the one-year anniversary today in history, and I couldn't believe it was the 50th anniversary of the team, that it took 50 years with all those great pitchers, Seaver, Kuzma, Matlack, Nolan Ryan, and the list goes on and on, David Cone, Dwight Gooden, who most of them pitched no-hitters after they left the team. And it just amazes me, like Nolan Ryan, of course, with 7 of them, that it took that long, but it was quite a day, quite a memory that day, and who knows when it'll happen again.
Well, here's the question: is he on the disabled list because of that no-hitter? So a lot of people think that pitch count had.
Thinks so.
Yeah,
it still haunts him to this day. But he pitched a few good games after. I would say one game couldn't have done it. I don't really think one game did it, because he was coming off major surgery in itself, but there's no way to really say 100% for sure. But for one game, yeah.
Well, let's ask you as a Mets fan, now put away your radio host hat now and put on your Mets fan hat. And I know how you feel about pitch count, but let's just look at the perspective of here's your ace. He's going into the 8th inning with a no-hitter. He's coming off of major surgery. You want to see him complete the no-hitter, get the first no-hitter in Mets history?
Well, I did at the time, and the whole thing. It's funny, in the 6th inning, the way he went through a little bit of a rough patch. I think he walked a batter. A guy got on base on an error. He was a pitch count. They said there's no way at the time. Even the announcers were saying there's no way he was going to get that. It was improbable. But you're thinking historic. You've never seen it. That's one of the reasons we're watching every inning. You're not thinking about the future right now. You're thinking about the present.
Okay.
It's just, but you're not thinking about it. He's healthy. He's been healthy. You just don't think, well, we're going to pull him out. It almost wasn't an option.
Okay.
And he wasn't going to come out of that game no matter what the manager did.
Right. Understand. And he was probably going to fight the manager if he came out to the mound to pull him. But let's look at it from a perspective of something that didn't happen, obviously. Let's say that one of those Mets pitchers that you mentioned from the past had thrown the first Mets no-hitter back in the late 70s or early 80s or the mid 60s.
Been pulled. He might have been. That's a good question. But there's no way to show. The pitch count was 134 that night.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and there's no way. There was a Diamondbacks pitcher who was up in 140 a couple of years ago. He pitched that no-hitter. Can't remember his name, but he made his next start.
Yep. Well, and here's the thing. There's nobody wearing a professional uniform in any sport that is not at the highest level of competition, that is not the highest level of a competitor. I just can't see any pitcher throwing a no-hitter that is actually going to not want to fight the manager about pulling me out. I don't care what my pitch count is. I got a no-hitter going here.
Well, here's the other thing. A few years ago, it was the late 90s, David Cohn was out for some time with an aneurysm. He had an aneurysm.
Mm-hmm.
He had some difficulties. He was pitching a no-hitter after 7 innings, and Joe Torre pulled him because it was his first game back, and he was on a pitch count. Strictly because of his health.
Right.
But, hey, you're coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the aneurysm, that's a little bit a serious issue, you know. But, yeah, and I would bet when Joe let him know that he was coming out, he was still probably pretty steamed about it.
Yeah. But you know what? He turned around and pitched a perfect game not long after that. On the day of the anniversary, not the anniversary, but the day when Don Larson was at the game, it was an old-timers game, and Yogi Berra, and Don Larson threw out the first pitch to Yogi Berra, who had the only perfect game in World Series history.
Right.
And they were both there watching the game. That's kind of almost haunting at that place.
It's an amazing coincidence. But again, you know what we talked about for as long as baseball has been around, you're going to create those kind of lore situations just by the very fact that now, what is there, 15, 16 ball games almost on any given day?
Almost every day. Well, actually 15. And do you know, speaking of which, when they did the interleague play last week, Monday through Friday, they had all the cities and the teams that didn't actually are in each city. They matched up some other teams.
Right.
With the Braves in Toronto, they just matched them up. It was the first time since interleague play began where there was no National League game on a given day because it was 16-14. And they always had to beat the two extra teams in the National League.
Right.
But now that it's an odd number with Houston in the American League, 15-15, it was even. 15
it was
games.
Even 15 games.
All interleague.
All interleague. Yeah.
That was the first.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Pretty interesting. Yeah, you know, you talk about the odd matchup in Detroit and Pittsburgh. Had 2 in Detroit, and then they had 2 in Pittsburgh. And the Pittsburgh pitchers tied up the Tigers pretty good. I got to say that I was pretty impressed because they won 2 1-0 ball games against the Tigers.
Yeah.
And with that lineup, to hold them 1-0 twice in the same week, pretty impressive.
Both places, or?
Yeah, 1 in each place. Yeah, 1 in Tiger State or Comerica, and 1 in Pittsburgh's.
Yeah, PNC Park,
PNC.
which is a beautiful park, by the way. I'd like to visit that. That's a nice looking park.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing this week. Let's talk about that suspension rule that came up this week. A 40-year-old suspension rule, and you know the suspension rule was if the team comes up and it's a threat of rain, they're going to possibly call the game. Let's say it's the 8th inning and it's a tie game, and then all of a sudden the team gets 3 runs. Well, it's the opportunities for the home team to match that because it was in that inning. So the game was called to be suspension, give them a chance.
Right.
This situation happened with Kansas City this week in St. Louis.
What a nightmare.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. Because the score, if they end up having to call the game, reverts back to the last full inning.
Well, and what we're talking about here is they changed the rule this year in the case where this is the last game that these two people are playing this year. It's the last time, like Kansas City's going to be at St. Louis. It's
Right.
not like they play because the way the schedule's set up, most of the teams only visit a city once a year, unless you're in the same division. They changed the rule now. If it's the last time, that rule is thrown out the window, basically. And the reason they got rid of it 40 years because it was a bad rule anyway.
Right.
And now they go, Kansas, it almost cost Kansas City.
It almost cost Kansas City because the very situation that you talked about. Kansas City trailed going into the bottom of the ninth, or the top of the ninth, top of the ninth, 2-1. They score 3 runs in their half of the night, and then a torrential downpour comes. And they call the tarp out, and they have to sit there and sit there and sit there.
5 hours.
5 hours. Now, can you imagine? I'm sure that nobody that paid admission was still in that ballpark at 4 a.m. when they resumed for the last 3 outs of the ninth.
Yeah, and the thing is, they were ahead 4-2, and they got them. Their closer got them 1-2-3, and they won.
Yes.
But if that game was called, they would have lost the game.
Kansas City loses the game, and St. Louis gets another win. That's right.
Because it would have reverted back to the end of 8 innings.
Last full inning, correct.
Yeah. And that would have been crummy.
Well, obviously, what they haven't really thought through is those kinds of situations when you have a team visiting a park that they're not going to visit again for the rest of the year. There's going to have to be some tweaking of the rules, obviously.
There's a lot of rules that are going to have to be tweaked.
Well, I think that, I can't help but feel like Buck Showalter's idea it was the best one I heard as far as this. And, of course, now that's going to get a lot of attention from the owners, especially the 2 owners that have to give up their teams, because one of the highlights of Showalter's plan was to retract 2 teams. And
it was going to be the Florida team.
He just said the Florida teams.
Minnesota was another possibility.
That was another possibility. That's right. For a small market, though, they usually do pretty well for a small market team.
They were with the first not expansion year, because they were the Washington Senators, and they did carry all those records with them to Minnesota. The only true first-time team that year was the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim in 1961.
Right. And, the way that Showalter's plan was that everybody plays everybody, home and home, 3-game series. That's it. And, it's perfect, because then you don't have situations where, what if, we can get this rain out? Okay, well, if you get the rain out on Friday night, then you play a doubleheader. And if you want to do it, morning, evening, or, whatever, you play the doubleheader on Sunday.
Look what happened with the Mets this year. Not that it's going to affect them in any playoff situation this year, but they went at the beginning in frigid cold weather. This is the first time in history a team got snowed out 3 out of 4 games. They were in Minnesota and Colorado, and what did they have to do? On a day off travel day from California, on 2 California West Coast trips this year, that one time they had to stop in Minnesota for 1 game, and another time they got to stop in Colorado for 1 game.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
And here was something else that happened this week that was fairly historic. The Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks played a real old-fashioned doubleheader.
Now, was that because of the travel day? I tried to look it up, because they had the day off, which is a rare day off, Tuesday, and then they went to Texas to play the other 2 games.
I think that was put in the schedule for that. I think the Diamondbacks are trying to bring back the old-fashioned doubleheader on Memorial Day. And so I believe that was in the schedule that way on purpose. And, that's one of the things. If they're going to insist on having this 162-game schedule, I think they've got to have more doubleheaders so that there are more built-in off days, and so that you can do things like this unfortunate trip that the Mets are going to have to make, flying from the West Coast to Minnesota on one trip and
Three cities, 3 days.
Yeah,
twice.
Yeah. And if you look at it, the baseball players only get like 4 or 6 days off a month anyway.
And they're usually canceled by the rain out and the makeup games,
right?
And the travel day,
which is again why I think they've got to go back to your basic old time doubleheader: 2 games, 1 day.
And the owners need to put the greed away. That can happen.
And
they'll fill the people, and they'll have plenty of vending.
That's right. That's right. I remember the Tigers used to play probably 6 twilight doubleheaders a year. It was fabulous. It started the first game started like at 5 o'clock. They played that game. Then your second game started somewhere at 7:30, 8 o'clock. It was always 20 minutes after the last game ended or a half hour after the last game ended.
I looked at an old Mets schedule in the early 60s, when they first started.
Mm-hmm.
It was 22 scheduled doubleheaders.
Yeah.
22.
Yeah.
Most of them on Sundays.
Right.
Yeah,
A lot of Sunday doubleheader, daytime doubleheaders. And that's the other thing. Practically every team is playing all their games at night. The Tigers play Saturday nights at Comerica, which I don't understand because I used to spend a lot of Saturdays going to Tiger Stadium to watch an afternoon ball game.
And at that time, too, the World Series was even during the day.
No, that's...
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, the TV took over that rule. That's a whole other story.
Well, and amen to that, because I do remember being in high school, sitting around before going out to football practice, listening to the radio and hearing, "Oh, Bob Gibson struck out another one."
Well, I remember when the Mets were in the World Series in '69. I was in 5th grade. And the nuns rolled the TV into the classroom so we could watch it.
Well,
Because that was New York. But
yes, right.
And everybody was into that crazy season.
Yeah,
but I remember having it on the TV.
Yeah, I can assure you, where I went to school, there was no TV going on in the classroom.
That was an unusual event.
Yes.
The same summer that man landed on the moon for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very different times. If they could just get back to the old-fashioned thing. I looked it up too. I couldn't find it, but the last time the D-backs did that with the schedules, because there was another event going on in the ballpark on that day off. So I don't know if that was the case this year or not.
Yeah, I think they from what I read about it, they're trying to bring the tradition back of having a regular doubleheader. 2 games the same time. 1 admission gets you both games.
And if they did that, the season would shorten.
Well, it would definitely shorten. It would, you talk about, and you mentioned a little bit ago about the all these pitchers getting the Tommy John surgery and that kind of thing. I just wonder how it would affect the DLs if there wasn't this grind. If you had more days off built into the schedule because you played more doubleheaders.
Yeah, Lou Gehrig in that 2,130 game streak, he said, "Yeah, I had day offs when we traveled. We got on the train for a day or 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's very, very, very different." One last thing before we wrap it up today, we were talking earlier about Miguel Cabrera, who won the Triple Crown last year, and he's putting up some stellar numbers this year. No one has ever won the Triple Crown in baseball 2 years in a row. As a matter of fact, when he won it last year, no one had won it before since 1967.
And Carl Yastrzemski in 67. And in 67, when Yaz won it, he won it with a .301 batting average.
Mm-hmm.
But,
actually, he batted .326.
Was it .326? I thought he had .301.
121 RBIs and 44 home runs.
Okay.
And it's a very similar numbers because Cabrera had 44 home runs also. But no one has ever won it 2 years in a row.
Which is pretty hard to fathom when you stop and think about some of the great players, the great hitters that have gone on before. Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, just some of the fabulous hitters. Joe DiMaggio. How could there not have been?
Well, speaking of Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams, in the 40s, 41, 42, and 47, Ted Williams should have won the MVP. Why? His team didn't make it to the World Series. Each of those years, the Yankees did. He batted .406 in 41 the same year. DiMaggio had his 56-game hitting streak. Who won the MVP? Joe DiMaggio. 42. He does the Triple Crown. Who wins the MVP? Joe Gordon, because his team went to the World Series. And Joe Gordon only won it because Joe DiMaggio was in the Army.
Right.
47, Ted Williams wins the Triple Crown again 5 years later. Why doesn't he win it? Joe DiMaggio wins it. His team's in the World Series.
And I think that's, kind of a prejudice that was back then, that you couldn't be an MVP unless your team made it to the World Series. That's what MVP meant, that you led your team to the World Series. And I'm not sure that I agree with that. In fact, I have to say I don't agree with that.
And we've actually, I think Willie Stargell was at one time. It was Willie Stargell. The Pirates in last place, he won the MVP.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because they'd have won maybe 2 games that year if they didn't have Willie Stargell.
Yeah. And Cabrera right now is leading the league in an average of 372. He's leading in RBIs with 61, and he's second in home runs, 3 behind Chris Davis with 16. So he's right there again.
Chris Davis is tearing the place up, and he could keep Cabrera from winning that thing. But it's still early. Today's only June 1st. We've got a long road to travel still.
The fact that it's a possibility is just incredible.
That's the amazing thing. That's the amazing thing. And some people are saying that they think that Cabrera is the best pure hitter in baseball right now, and that could very well be. It remains to be seen, and it's certainly a topic for some of our future shows.
Absolutely. Well, it's been another great week of baseball. There's always something great that happens, some controversy, something to talk about, whether it's the umpires or a bad rule. But we'll pick this up again next week. Thanks for joining us. Gerard, thanks for being here. And everyone have a safe week out there. And tune in to Baseball, A Pure Perspective. You can check out our website, baseballapureperspective.com, or on Facebook, Baseball, A Pure Perspective.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting